Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Matt Taglia, the Senior Director of Emerson College Polling. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
South Carolina's senior Senator Lindsey Graham passed away very unexpectedly this past weekend at the age of 71.
Nobody saw this coming. A sitting senator gone in the middle of his term, and now an entire state is scrambling to answer one question: what happens next? That's exactly why you need to see this.
This past weekend at the age of 71. And the news was shocking for a host of different reasons. One, he had just returned from Ukraine on a trip the day before he passed away, and he was also running to serve a fifth term. Last month, he won his primary. Now there's going to be a special Republican primary in August to replace him in the race, and the filing period to run opens next week. Emerson took a poll to see who voters want to replace him on the ballot. So to start off the conversation, what did you find?
Yeah, Brittany, and what we found is that this is very much just a totally open race. So a disclaimer here that these are just hypothetical candidates. As you said, filing doesn't even open until next week. I don't believe that we've had anyone as of yet who has declared their candidacy. But we decided to test some of the bigger names in South Carolina politics. So the ballot test really doesn't give us too much of a clue, though, of where we're going. So leading the ballot is Ralph Norman, Representative Ralph Norman with 16%. We have former Senate candidate Mark Lynch at 13%, former Representative Nancy Mace at 10%, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette at 10%, Representative Fry at 8%, Governor McMaster also at 8%, and then finally Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham Nordone at 6%. And then Mark Sanford, we also tested at 5%, with 18% undecided.
8 names, 1 seat, but the real story isn't who's in the lead. It's that 18% still have no idea who they want. That's a race wide open for anyone.
And then finally, Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham Nordone, at 6%. And then Mark Sanford, we also tested at 5%, with 18% undecided. So this does run the gamut as far as candidates go. We tested as many as we thought might be interested or have viability on the ballot. And again, we really just don't know what will happen here. I think once we do start to see candidates declare and file, things will change quickly, but this is very much an open race.
To that point, these are some big names in South Carolina. We have sitting members of Congress, a past governor, the current governor, a lieutenant governor, someone who challenged Lindsey Graham in the primary. But what has the plurality here really is undecided with 18%. Someone else is 5%. So that means 23% don't have a clue on these names or they want someone else. So when you look at that, do you think this is anyone's race?
Trump's silence here speaks almost as loud as an endorsement would. He's praising people without picking a side. Is that strategy, or is he genuinely undecided? The numbers coming up might just answer that.
Don't have a clue on these names or they want someone else. So when you look at that, do you think this is anyone's race?
Yeah, this is absolutely anyone's race, Brittany. And I think that, we need to be clear. There could be more folks who come out of the woodwork. These were just the folks that we thought have recently either stood for election in North Carolina or known to the South Carolina electorate. We saw some other responses in that someone else category, like Trey Gowdy and Nikki Haley, who we didn't necessarily include in the ballot test, but they would probably pick up around 5% support if we had in total. So, yeah, this is very much anyone's game, and it may not be someone who's even listed here.
President Trump didn't endorse anyone in this race, but in the wake of Lindsey Graham's death, he had glowing things to say, not only about the late senator, but his sister as well. He said she was outstanding, but she is interim right now because she was sworn in to fill his seat for the rest of his term earlier this week. But he did say Congressman Russell Fry is outstanding, talented, and a name to watch out for. But he stopped short of endorsing anyone, including Russell Fry. How much would a Trump endorsement impact this race?
Yeah, Brittany, I think that's the million-dollar question. Who will Trump endorse? Because his endorsement will really matter here. So when we asked folks about their vote and how Trump's endorsement would make a difference, 41% said that they were more likely to support that candidate that Trump endorses. 41% said it made no difference. Then 19% said that it would make them less likely. But I think that 41% number that say it would make them more likely to support, I'd really focus on that, especially when we're looking at that undecided number. Among those undecided voters, 46% say that Trump's endorsement makes them more likely to support a candidate in the race. So again, I think Trump's endorsement, if he does endorse, would be a really, really big deal here.
President Trump is still very popular in South Carolina amongst Republicans. This poll found that he has a 77% approval rating amongst GOP primary voters. The state's governor, Henry McMaster, has a 56% favorable rating amongst the Republican primary voters in his state as well.
A 77% approval rating is nothing to brush off. Trump may be staying quiet in this race, but his shadow is over every single candidate, and that's exactly why his next move could flip this whole thing upside down.
Carolina amongst Republicans. This poll found that he has a 77% approval rating amongst GOP primary voters. The state's governor, Henry McMaster, has a 56% favorable rating amongst the Republican primary voters in his state as well. When you're looking at those numbers, what do you think that says about the Republican base and who they could support in this race? Because when you're thinking about who Lindsey Graham was as a politician, in recent years, he was one of President Trump's most staunch allies in the Senate. But when you're looking at his whole history, he is a senator who was able to work across the aisle on a whole host of different issues.
Yeah, I think Trump is very much going to play a major role here. Like you said, 77% of these potential primary voters have a favorable opinion of Trump. I think it is worth bearing in mind that, you know, the South Carolina authorities have just really released who will be able to vote in this primary. And so we will have independents and Democrats. The only folks who won't be able to vote in this primary are folks who voted in the Democratic primary earlier this year. So you will inevitably have some number of Democrats in the mix. You know, like you said, Lindsey Graham was a senator who did reach across the aisle at various points. I think that there will be some degree of having to appeal to bipartisanship here. But ultimately, I do think that Trump MAGA voter, they are really going to be the deciding factor here. I think you have to win those folks over more so than anyone else.
I'm very curious how GOP primary voters in South Carolina feel about Graham's replacement, which is his sister, Darlene Graham Nordone. Because in life, Lindsey Graham was very complimentary of her. And since he passed away, quotes about her from him have been making the rounds, and I'm going to read one now. He said this about his sister over a decade ago. If she took a role on, she would be a great representative of our country. I can't think of a better person to represent our country in an event than my sister. And she was appointed and has been sworn in since he passed away to serve out the rest of his term. But she didn't have a career in politics aside from joining him on the campaign trail and endorsing him, speaking glowingly of him while he was campaigning. But how do South Carolina voters feel about her?
Yeah, Brittany. And, I think when we test her favorability, I think it's a little bit unfair because most voters have never heard of Darlene Graham Nordone. And as we see in the ballot test, she earned 6% of the vote. I don't expect, and we've seen no indication, that she will run for the full term in the Senate seat. So I think that South Carolinian voters like her. They are happy with her being the person to serve out the rest of Senator Graham's term. But I don't think that there is necessarily a political future for her here.
Matt Taglia, I appreciate the poll. There's certainly a lot to look out for in South Carolina. Thank you so much for breaking it down.